Racer.
So on driving and measuring my metric of success.
Yes, last but definitely not least, we have two very special guests. May I welcome on stage Nix Nolledo, founder and CEO of Xurpas, all the way from the Philippines.
Please come up here, Nix. Great to have you here.
And our Endeavor Entrepreneur of the Year 2017 from Bukalapak, Fajrin Rasyid.
Please join us. Our second co-founder of Bukalapak. You want to sit there again? You want there or there? Okay. See, I'm the assistant. I listen to Sati and she tells me where to sit and then things work out.
Thank you. So thank you both for being here. Shall I ask the first question?
You ask the first question. Then it is always a good conversation.
Okay. No,
I want my phone. No. I just want my phone.
But, all right. Thank you both for being here. Nix, you have a very interesting story, and I'm never bored of hearing it. So one of the reasons why we have brought Nix here, Nix is a big role model in the Philippines. He grew his company Xurpas from zero to IPO with zero investor funding. So it's extremely impressive. Do you want to let us know how you start off? Because I know you didn't start off in tech, and sort of the arch of that journey, just to start us off.
Okay, so I'm probably one of the more unusual tech backgrounds or backgrounds for a tech entrepreneur. I used to work at a KFC mall branch in Manila. Couldn't get a job after university. Spent 1 year in 2 different mall branches of KFC. Then started an online message board in the Philippines in 1999 with $200 of paid up capital.
But 1999, that was not when this was modern or in this. You were quite new.
Well, the internet was very new, especially in emerging markets. So I couldn't program a single line of code, license a software called Ultimate Bulletin Board, put up a website, found a way to growth hack it without spending. And it became the largest website in the Philippines after 45 days.
45 days?
Now, mind you, there weren't that many websites coming from the Philippines. So, but you know, we had 100,000 unique users when the Philippines had 1 million online users back in 1999. Of course, the hosting cost went through the roof. I couldn't afford it. There were not enough advertisers. I was forced to sell it very quickly. Then realized that, ran across a very interesting statistic, that there were 6 million cell phones versus 2 million PCs. This was already in year 2000. And then I said, you know, for internet to grow in emerging markets, 2 things need to happen. Cost of access needed to go down, and cost of the device to access the internet needed to drop as well. You cannot sell toothpaste to people who don't have toothbrushes. Concluded that the future of the internet must be mobile. Left with 2 engineers, and then started my present business, which is a mobile tech company, with $1,350 of paid up capital.
So you had probably many people telling you you were making a stupid mistake.
Well, you know, back in 2001, there weren't too many people looking at mobile internet.
What gave you the courage? What gave you the intonation to do that?
Courage is easy. I mean, what did I have, right? I came from I don't come from a wealthy family. I didn't inherit anything. I didn't have a big multinational job to give up. There was really not, at that point in time, back in 2001, the substitute or for being an entrepreneur was really a desk job at the remember, I couldn't get a job when I graduated from university.
May I ask, who in your life, if you look back for those decisions, gave you what you call the easy thing, courage to do this?
Well, I actually come from a family of successful professionals, successful lawyers, successful doctors. And their playbook for my family was do very well in school, academically, do well in the boards or the bar, get into a good clinic, hospital, or law firm, and just earn your keep being a professional. So there was an expectation of that for me. I didn't excel academically. And so for several years, I always felt like I was a fish being forced to climb a tree. And entrepreneurship was a divergent path, and thankfully, I didn't really borrow money from my family. It was money that I had saved being a KFC manager, was what I had spent or what I had invested. So my family gave me the leeway to try to be an entrepreneur, even though there were really no family role models that they would be able to point to help me out through that journey. But you know, I was in my early 20s. I didn't have massive savings. I still lived in my parents' home. So in terms of sheer courage, I wouldn't say that was really that difficult a point of decision that just because I didn't really give up much to make that attempt.
Are there later decisions you think that took more courage?
I think when we did the IPO, I think that was an unusual move because there was no other tech company that was listed in the Philippines.
When was that?
That was in December of 2014.
And how big were you then?
By that time, we had about 200 employees already.
Wow. Bold.
Yes, but when we were going through that process, there were about 10 underwriters who rejected us. They didn't want to, essentially when they underwrite you, they guarantee that the money that you will raise would be fully spoken for, right? They felt the market would not understand us, and multiple rejections there, of course, would make you uncertain about that trajectory. But unlike, let's say, Singapore or even Indonesia, the amount of venture capital going through the Philippine startup ecosystem is significantly less than the amount of capital that's going through this startup ecosystem. Here you have a few companies that have raised $1 billion already or several $100 million. In the Philippines, at around 2014 to 2015, less than $50 million was raised collectively by all of the startups in the country put together.
Wow.
So it's a much smaller market, but provides a lot of opportunity. So the IPO was deemed a big risk at the time, but we still push through with it.
How would you describe your journey? We've heard your colleague earlier today. Now's the time to set it right, have us understand what really happened, because you're the guy who keeps it all together. So please share.
Well, I hope what I share was same with Zaky, not conflicting.
No, we want the different story. We want the real story.
Yeah, well, if I can say one, then it would be a roller coaster, because it really is. Maybe it looks from outside that, oh, Bukalapak is growing fast, everything is going fine. Not really, I would say. I mean, there's a lot of problems that we face, similarly with other companies as well, probably. Different phase of the company, of course, have different problems. For example, when we were really at the very beginning of the company, when we were only like 5 people or something, it's like life or death scenario, right? That's why if we were to have a challenge to that phase, is to find people who really want to help us through this life and death process. And meaning that the people who are in the very early phase of the startup, some of you are probably at the very earliest stage of startup, you have to be flexible. You cannot be too rigid, right? Say, oh, this is not my job because I'm in this area, I don't want to do this job, right? That kind of mentality will not work at the very beginning because it's life or death matters, right? So that's why they're saying that CEO is actually Chief Everything Officer. So you have to you have to be willing to do everything, right? Even like on the ground, doing whatever it is, coming to your customers, handling customer complaints and everything. So let's say from the beginning. But of course now it's the opposite, right? We have to be professional in the sense that everyone has to be clear, has to have a clear role regarding what to do and everything. So a lot of challenges. Different phases have different challenges. Yeah, well, I can speak to you in other way, but I think that's one way
Well,
to
the
say
one
it.
thing I like about you and about Zaky, you're so open about saying that there are challenges and that it is difficult. I'm very impressed by that. Thank you.
So we actually have some great questions coming out of the audience. So we're going to
Finally.
go straight into it. Ines? Questions? Is it going on? Oh, here we go.
To Nix, will
Okay.
you do another IPO or prefer ICO?
Let's pick. What is your biggest regret as an entrepreneur? So if you want to look at the questions behind you, who do you want to take on? Which one do you want to take on first?
They're all good questions. So there are 4 questions.
Yes,
Two
you
of
can
you,
take
the
two
one who
each.
goes first picks.
You guys choose.
Oh, okay. Well,
Two.
one is to Nix, so that's clear. If you want to take on the IPO versus ICO.
Okay.
What is your best tips for ICO? That's actually quite a technical question.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
also financially driven. And
Okay.
as Manila is in the centerpiece of new tech, what would be your cut at it, Nix?
I'm also a very active angel investor in my market, but I've invested outside the Philippines as well. But admittedly, from an ICO perspective, there was a investee company of mine out of Manila that did a token sale and raised $40 million from the Philippines. So that one company raised more money.
When was that? 2 years ago, or?
They did their sale in November, and then a lot of their private sale was done in November, then the public sale culminated this February. Prior to that, it had only raised $1.5 million in venture capital. So one is, it became a moment of truth for me when something so close to me was able to generate that much capital without any equity dilution. Number 2, because that company continues to own more than half of its tokens unissued, it essentially created about $100 million of asset value. The amount of capital that you raise, that you sell as tokens in the token sale is different from the amount of assets that you create. Because the per unit price of the token, the company continues to hold about 2/3. Means that about $100 million of token value or asset value is created. Number 3, I realized that no VC would fund its competitor anymore because it was in an interesting sort of fintech space, unique fintech space. It was doing secured lending, so it's an online pawn shop out of the Philippines. Because it was in that unique space, and it was an early mover, it was first to ICO at scale, I can't imagine a VC funding any of its competitors because they would have to be early stage, and that competitor would be raising a few $1 million. The VC would do a Google search and then say, hey, you have a competitor who has $100 million in asset value. Unless you're 100 times better, you probably can't compete. So it's created its own moat. And because there is no equity dilution, it's possible for that entity to do a second token sale where it creates a security token and tokenizes its share of stock.
So coming back to the question, will you do another IPO or prefer ICO?
Well, it's actually harder for a publicly listed company to ICO. So in my context, I have to be much more careful regulatory-wise versus a private company. The answer is very clear. If you are a private company, it's hard not to consider looking at doing an ICO. For me, in particular, where I sit, it's harder.
Understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Nick. So we'll go to Zaky, to Fajrin, sorry. Yeah, he's gonna get upset with me after this. Fajrin. The Ritwan Shah question. It seems like empathy is the most important foundation to find self-purpose or the meaning of success. Great question, Ritwan Shah. What is your comment? Would you like to share your experience?
Well, I saw some sessions before me talking a lot about we have to follow your passions, follow the purpose and everything. I kind of agree and disagree on that because essentially what I think is that you cannot know the purpose or passion before you try. So sometimes we tend to not doing everything or tend to not trying because we think that, oh, I don't think it's going to be my purpose or I don't think it's going to be my passion. Whereas what I can see from, at least from what I have done, is that you'll never know actually what your passion is before you try. So for me, I think as an initial way for you to find your passion or to follow your passion is that you have to try as many as possible. And for that, it's okay for you to follow the thing or the journey or the work, anything, the company that you think has the good or best opportunities at first, right? You can find passion after that. So, in fact, for me, I mean, the real reason why when Zaky asked me to, no, actually, I asked Zaky to join. Well, I couldn't remember. But I think, so, okay, here's the story. So Zaky asked me to help him, initially, to help him founding Bukalapak. At the time, I was still in BCG, working in BCG as a consultant. And as a consultant, I know a bit about the business. So I try to help him during my part-time at night or in weekends as a pro bono consulting. But I turned to enjoy doing that to the point that this business is interesting. I asked Zaky to, hey, Zaky, I want to help as a full-time partner / co-founders. So that's the story. At the time, I wasn't thinking about, oh, Bukalapak can help SMEs or anything, right? What I think is that Bukalapak is actually a good business models, have a big potential in the future. But over time, when I joined Bukalapak, as time goes by, Bukalapak grew from 5 people into now 1,500 people, more or less. I also found that apparently the Bukalapak is good not just as a business model, but Bukalapak can succeed only if all the SMEs in the platform succeeds. So that's where I find my passion that, look, I really like to help these SMEs. I really like to find how they can grow, and it's really meaningful for me to watch them doing so. So, for example, when I went to Bandung, I think a few months ago, in this gathering of SMEs of Bukalapak in Bandung, I thought, so there is like one guy, maybe about 40, 50, 45-year-old with his probably about 10-year-old son. I thought the seller is the father, but apparently the seller is the son. This 10-year-old kid have maybe revenues at about 10 million rupiah a month.
Wow.
So this maybe 5th grader students, and he asked me, or he told me essentially, look, I'm really helped by Bukalapak, so thank you for creating Bukalapak. So that kind of thing really sort of like make me realize that what I do, along with my, of course, other people in Bukalapak, is really something that has a really big impact in the future. And that's when the empathy turns on, right? You can actually achieve much better if you have the purpose or passion behind it.
Yes.
But it's okay for you when you start doing so, you don't know about like the big picture and everything, because you never know it before you try.
Yeah.
That's why. That's sort of like my.
Wow, what a story.
Do we want to take on one more?
Well, I like this question about the exponential growth without investors funding.
So,
Nix, that's
Nix,
probably really a question for you.
Okay. Everything I do has a B2B2C business model. So when I mentioned that my first business was $200 and then it scaled, and then my current business, $1,350, paid up capital, and then it was able to grow without fundraising. Both were because they were a B2B2C business model. When I started looking at groups that raised a ton of capital, And their business model is transactional. Typically, 80% of the VC money they raise will go to customer acquisition cost. Half of that might be going to subsidies. The other half goes to paid advertising. And then they calibrate. You need to be a very good fundraiser, and you need to be very good at really driving your GMV, gross merchandise value, sometimes artificially by over-subsidizing, meaning giving your products at 50% off, giving all of these free vouchers to guys who won't necessarily repeat the purchase. So you have a lot of artificial GMV. That's a hard game to play and a bit of a winner-take-all. Obviously, the winners who do take all become extremely large and great for them. I realized for myself, having never raised venture capital in my journey, I didn't have that fundraising skill. So, everything we've done is a B2B2C business model, and the key component is being able to identify what is a good middle B, or rather channel for you to acquire customers. So for us, a good middle B, one has access to a very large community. Two, has the ability to tell that community about your product or service. Three, has the ability for you to bill and charge for payment of services from that community. And four, ideally gives you an advantage when it comes to fulfillment of the delivery of the product or service to the community. So think through your product or service, who your target audience is, and what would a good middle B or channel would be for you to freely acquire customers. And then from there, of course, nothing's stopping you from supplementing that cheaper customer acquisition cost through some paid advertising, through some virality effects to unlock, push your growth up a bit more.
So you're all here's very thorough structural business model thinking behind, and then you can make it. But you really have to know what you're doing. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Next question.
Well, just to you, and maybe a little bit outside of point, what's the secret of the two of you as co-founders of Bukalapak getting so far and not killing each other or doing this together? What, if you could help us understand a little bit about the magic or the struggle, or because this is impressive.
I know Zaky since high school, and it has both good and bad sides. Creating business with your friends. So the good thing is you already know your friends. What's his skill set? What's also his strength? Of course, what also his weakness and something like that. The bad thing is that sometimes you have to create a line between what business and the friendship is, right? Because when you're talking about the business, you have to be professionals. When we talk about the friends, for example, friends come late to the meeting, it's okay. But when you're talking in business, you cannot be late, right? So that's for example. So luckily, we also understand that. So although we both good friends, but we try to have a clear guidelines on what do we expect from each other. And that's really clear even until now. For example, what's the responsibility of this area? Is it me or Zaky? So
and what will keep you together over the next 10 years to go to the next several billion?
I think we try to leverage the strength and weakness for each other's, right? I mean, so for example, I think it's also mentioned last night that Zaky, for example, is the idea person. So maybe some of you are familiar as well. Zaky is like really has some genius idea, really out of mind ideas. I'm not. So if you ask me like to create a new business, I don't know what to do. But I'm more like analysis type of guy, right? So Zaky has idea and then I try to analyze it. What's the plus, minus? Maybe even try to sort of like draw into a financial projection, things like that. So that's what I am good at. And that's why also, for example, in terms of the financial, corporate finance, fundraising and everything, it's all come to me. Zaky, of course, has inputs. Sometimes I ask him to join some of the meetings, but usually when it comes to negotiate with the potential investors and some others, it's all to me, right?
Beautiful.
So the opposite is for the marketing and sales, for example. So I can, of course, provide inputs regarding what's the promotion, what's the theme, what's the campaign, but in the end, if we have a different opinion, And I will just follow Zaky on the marketing side.
Wow, wow, thank you for that. For you, one other question, Nix. I've been talking to some friends in Manila, I know. I said you would be coming here. And people have been telling me that in your company around, there's a very strong followership. People adore you, people love to work with you, and are proud to be part of your company. What is your secret?
You could see how comfortable he is when you're making this assertion about him being a role model.
Well, it's just being told to me by other people, and I thought if I ask you now on the spot, you might give me a good answer. If I ask you later, you'll run to your plane.
I think it's also a function of there aren't that many tech role models yet. It's important, I believe, for any ecosystem to have many successful case studies and personalities so that people can admire, be mentored, learn from. It's positive in a way that I'm able to encourage earlier stage entrepreneurs in my market to want to build something very large and to scale. And them seeing that despite the country having less access to venture capital versus some of our neighbors in the region, that my story shows that it is possible. But at the same time, I think it's important. I couldn't really consider myself successful fully as an entrepreneur if my at least financial success as an entrepreneur did not translate into many more versions of me, so that the community really is able to be lifted holistically. So it's important that many more case studies, many more examples of success are created.
Oh, thank you for sharing.
Should I? Okay. This is the last question of the day. So if we were to be in Scale Up Asia 2023, and you're sitting here again together, celebrating something, what would you like to be celebrating? What celebration what would you want to say? 5 years.
So one of the hats that I wear is I sit on the board of the association of all of the call centers and BPOs in the Philippines. And I keep on telling I don't own a call center, nor do I own a business process outsourcing company. But I always tell my colleagues there, so the head of Accenture Philippines and head of Convergys, they're all my fellow board members. I always tell them, success for me is when the outsourcing industry becomes very small and Filipinos create products and services that are exported around the world, and we go outsource to other nations the lower margin, lower service type functions. If we can disrupt ourselves, then the economy grows even faster, and the opportunities around the country become even greater. And the biggest challenge is really, and then I think any company or entrepreneur who gets to solve it, it's an amazing opportunity, is how do you teach initiative? I mean, right now, a person with a smartphone and has access to the internet essentially has access to everything known to man. Just the internet has it, right? The challenge is how do you teach that base of the pyramid consumer to want to learn and teach himself? Initiative is the hardest thing to teach. He's going to play games, he's going to do other stuff. He won't really try to learn. And so it's something that I always challenge our association, and as well as the other tech entrepreneurs, because the opportunity to bridge the digital divide is actually digital, funny enough. And hopefully in 5 years' time, there's been a lot of progress, not just in our market, but in a lot of emerging markets. And then we can come to celebrate that upliftment for a big part of the population because of the technology initiatives that we've implemented.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing, Nix. Fajrin, take us home.
No pressure.
So what I am going to be proud of is that if I don't speak again here, but I'll speak probably over there, or probably just watching from where Buspida or others there, but instead watching all these new guys, hopefully from many from these rooms, speaking in the place where I am sitting now. So I'm talking about a lot more other people who are able to create a very successful business. In tech, of course, we're talking about more unicorns, but of course also we're talking about a lot of business who can have sustainable impacts. So I never consider myself success now, but if there is an opportunity for me to share the story of Bukalapak or myself, so long as my agenda permits, I usually are able to accept that, because we never know when and in what situation we may inspire others, right? So I'm always talking to everyone, if you can have something to share to other people, just share it. We never know. We cannot wait until we are very, very successful, because we never know when we are going to be successful. Even if you are thinking that, oh, I'm only like this, but there are still a lot of people who might learn something from you, who might learn from your story. So hopefully I'm now, and of course everyone here, are able to inspire you in some way, provide you some insights and everything. And maybe, who knows, 5 years later, it's your turn, right, to be here, present on behalf of me now.
Wow, thank you very much. With that, both of you, thank you so much.